felt. I don't know what he felt. And John was not very forthcoming about what he felt. He was quite a private person, and you'd only ever see it in tiny little instances, you know, that he... I remember once, I mean, one of the things I remember about John is silly little things. You don't remember all the great big moments. They just went by in a flash, you know, meeting the Queen, hi there, whew, gone, you know. But you remember stupid little things. I remember we were kind of arguing once about something musical or something. I remember John just kind of taking his glasses down and sort of saying, "It's only me," and putting them back up again. You know, so maybe he did have similar feelings towards us that we had to him, but he just didn't make it perhaps as obvious. But we were Lennon fans, definitely, you know. He was a great guy.
It's easy to see how these images take hold. Even sitting here talking to you, a man I hadn't met until half an hour ago, you're accessible, you're open. John seemed to have more of an air of danger, and people equate that with an artistic temperament. And so the easy compartments happen. Paul's the melody maker, John's the artistic soul of the Beatles. And people forget that, yeah, Paul wrote Yesterday, and he wrote The Long and Winding Road, but he also wrote Helter Skelter, and Why Don't We Do It in the Road? He wrote Day Tripper. You know, how much does it bother you still that people don't have the full picture?
It doesn't really bother me too much, you know. It's a natural thing that happens there. I was actually just talking to someone before about that. I think the only way I could get the kind of edge John had would be to have a different childhood. And I certainly wouldn't have wished for that. You know, John had a real bad time in his childhood. As I say, you know, his father left home when he was 3. His mother lived with someone down the road. He didn't live with his mother, although he idolized her. He lived with his aunt and uncle. Then the uncle died. John started to think he's got a jinx, and any men he lives with leave rather suddenly. And I think John was a very frightened person about that. His first marriage didn't work out. So he had a lot of pain, you know, inside himself that I didn't have. So, I mean, the only alternative for me is to wish for a painful life, which I'm not going to do. You know, if that's what I require to be a great artist, then I don't want to be a great artist.
Maybe then the best situation is not to have to live the life, but to have him there as a sounding board. To have him...
I think that was what was the great thing,
have
you know.
both of you kind of...
And, you know, you have to remember me as a sounding board for John,
sure.
You know, because that is the thing I say to people, you know, if John had thought that I was rubbish, he didn't suffer fools, gladly. He wouldn't have worked with me as long as we did. We wouldn't have been able to do what we did if he didn't. We enjoyed it. We sat down. We really enjoyed each other's company. We're really good for each other, too. Because John, as you say, was more the sort of acid wit, the sort of... I mean, I was writing the song, a song off Sgt. Pepper. And John, it was always great this way, you know. I was writing the song, and he's sitting by the side. He had a guitar or some piano. I'm going, "It's getting better all the time," and he's going, "It couldn't get much worse." And you go, "Oh, get it down," you know. That's fantastic, you know. And I say, I don't care what people think or how they analyze it. I think if John was here now, I don't think he'd say he was the only one in the Beatles or that he was the soul of the Beatles. I think he'd admit that it was a pretty equal affair, really. But, you know, having said that, he was great. And I'm more than proud to have worked with someone like him. It was a great experience, you can imagine.
Just early inspiration?
Little Richard and Elvis. Elvis, yeah, then I had kind of 2 voices, till I sort of found my own voice. I was really an Elvis or a Little Richard impersonator. You find that with a lot of people. They start off doing records, you know, young bands, they do Beatle records, or they wear the Stones. In fact, I met Lionel Richie. He said, we used to have a garage band, he said, with broom handles. He said, and I was you. You know. So, but for me, Elvis was a very early love, till he went in the army. Then I went off him in a big way. But Little Richard I still love. I love Richard. It's particularly his early recordings, of course.
Are you doing Little Richard at the end of Hey Jude?
Yeah, you know, well, you know, I'm doing every black vocalist that ever wailed. You know, I'm doing that thing, you know, screaming up there somewhere. Yeah, but it all started with Little Richard when I heard Tutti Frutti. It was just the wildest record I'd ever heard. And I learned it. And at the end of the term in school, we always used to have the last day as a kind of crazy day. They let you do anything, you know. and the authority slackens a little in the school I went to. And we were allowed to bring guitars in. So I remember standing on a desk in the history room singing Tutti Frutti with all, it was like out of a film, like out of Grease or something, all the guys, hey, hey, go man, go. So I loved him, I loved Richard, and because we met him in Hamburg, and he's a funny guy. I mean, you know, he's like an actor now, and he's a great character, Richard.
Well, I think you put Long Tall Sally, as well as Chuck Berry thing, Roll Over Beethoven. That was on an early Beatles album, like the second or third one, wasn't it?
Yeah, I used to do Long Tall Sally, yeah. It's great.
And wasn't Lucille on the bootleg back in the USSR album,
used to do that. Lucille, Long Tall Sally. I used to do a few Richard numbers, yeah.
You mentioned Elvis going into the Army, and then Vegas wasn't far behind. And for obvious reasons, in the late 50s, early 60s, there was kind of a glass ceiling over a Little Richard or a Chuck Berry because of race. And you got into that, at least in American rock and roll, you got into that period of kind of sanitized people, of Bobby Rydell and Frankie Avalon and people like that. So in addition to their own originality, the Beatles came into this void where people said, give me something, and you guys arrived.
Yeah, it was a timing thing, I think. It really was, yeah. In Europe, you had this student thing. People always think that we started it. But the haircut and all this stuff was happening in Europe anyway. All the students, all the art school kids, you know, were sort of doing this. The actual haircut was from a guy in Hamburg called Jürgen Vollmer, who was a good friend of ours.
Oh, I remember him.
Do you remember? Wait a minute. Jürgen, who is still about, and he had his hair sort of down here. It was more that one, rather than sort of that one. And John and I we'd hitchhiked over to Paris round about his 21st birthday. He'd got some money off his rich auntie in Scotland, I think, and we went to Paris on the strength of this. And we met Jürgen. We said, could you do your hair like this, you know? Could you do our hair like yours? And so he said, oh, no, you don't want this. You know, you want the rock and roll, please, you know? And we said, no, man, it's great.
A little grease.
Yeah, you know, because he liked that. You know, he was into rock as a photographer. He liked the sort of the hoodie look, you know, the greaser look. But we said, no, you know, it's time for a change. We like yours, you know. So we arrived back in England, and of course we didn't quite know how to style it like his does, so ours just went poof, and just stopped there, you know. People said, God, what have you done with your hair, you know? And we hung in there. We said, oh, you know, it's the new fashion, oh, you know. But there were lots of kids that were picking up on that. So we became kind of the spokesman for that generation. And when we came over here, you hadn't really seen anything like it. And what was happening was there were Beatle wigs, if you remember, on sale. And what Capitol Records did, they got people like Janet Leigh to be photographed in a Beatle wig. These are like the publicity stunts. This is the level we were stooping to. But it was great, and it was very successful. So this crazy band had been talked about here. I think on the East Coast, we used to have friends who come back from like Boston, and they'd say, I heard somebody talking about you. We said, really? Oh, wow, you know, it's going to happen. And we said to our manager, we said, look, we're not going to appear in America until we got a #1 record. We just instinctively knew we had to come in in a power position, because if we crept in, we could just be kicked out the back door. And so we knew, we don't know why, but we just made this decision. And the news came when we were in Paris. Telegram from Capitol. They want to hold your hand, #1 in the US. We just hit the roof.
As the hotel manager of the Whittier Hotel and the Muhlenbeck Hotel signs an affidavit certifying that this is the Beatle bedding they slept on, and who slept on what sheet and belongs to who, Ringo, George, or Paul.
Now, when you get these things cut up into 1 square inches apiece, what are you going to do with them?
Sell them.
What's the funniest thing you remember about the hysteria days? The Ed Sullivan Show, the jumping in the limousines, the people at the airports?
Well, I mean, the trouble with it is I'm not sure if it's true, because some of these things are like so long ago that you keep the memory. And I ask myself, well, this is one that I remember, but I hope it's true. And it probably is. But I mean, what happened was we were in Madrid, and we often would just get locked in a hotel, and you go a bit stir crazy, you know, because the fans are out there and you can't really go around and stuff. So we're in this hotel, and we'd had a couple of drinks and stuff, and it was late at night, you know, and we were sort of getting quite funky and, you know, grooving around. We didn't have anything left to do except go to bed that night, so we were all right. We were off duty. And our manager came in and sort of said, Rudolf Nureyev is in the hotel downstairs and he'd like to meet you. So we're all going, oh yeah, great. Well, you know, send him up, man. You know, hey, yeah, sure, we'll meet him. But for a joke, because we were all in Spain, we all happened to have our swimming costumes with us, our swimming trunks. What do you call them over here?
Bathing suit?
Bathing suits. We happen to have
I'm just here to help.
Yeah, we happen to have our bathing suits with us. So when Rudy came in, we all put them over our heads and met him. Hi there, hello, how are you? And I mean, I'm not sure whether that's true or not, but I think we'll have to ask Rudy. And we just sat there, you know, and when he went, of course, we just collapsed on the floor.
Realize that you wrote at least a substantial part of When I'm 64 when you were 16.
I wrote the tune then, yeah. That was in the days, it was actually kind of pre-rock and roll. The kids now can't imagine a time when there wasn't rock and roll. But it was just before that. So it was kind of, you know, we were looking to kind of interest people like Sinatra rather than do rock and roll, you know. So I did this little da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then the words came later. But yeah, I wrote the tune when I was quite young.
So now you're closer to age 64 than you were either when you wrote the tune or when the whole thing came together and was
Thanks a lot,
released.
Yeah. Thanks, I love this guy. Yeah, no, that is true. I have to own up to this. Yeah, I'm fast approaching 50 next year. But, you know, hey, we're all getting there one way or another.
A lot of people would say, if you had to pick one album, Sgt. Pepper's The Album, would that jive with your own assessment, or is that more because it was a cultural impact and wasn't maybe as good musically?
I don't really make any differentiation between the albums. I kind of think for their time and for the musical knowledge we had, each one's got something special. I probably would choose Sgt. Pepper myself, because I had a lot to do with it.
That was your idea, sort of alter ego band, right?
You know, that was my idea. But it wasn't entirely my idea, but yeah, to get us away from being the Beatles, I had this idea that we should pretend we were another group. And it took hold, you know, even down to getting costumes made and everything. I think, yeah, I'd probably choose that if I had to, but I wouldn't want to, really. I'd prefer to sort of have each one for what they meant at the time. You know, Abbey Road is a nice album. Revolver's a nice album. Rubber Soul's a nice album. So I wouldn't like to choose, really. But if I had to, I'd probably, you know, on a desert island, I'd probably take Sgt. Pepper with me. It stands up. It's still a very crazy album. It still sounds crazy even now, after all these years. And you would think that it would have really dated and that stuff since it would sound so much more modern. But I don't think it does. Some of that stuff really sounds pretty wacky still.
I'll ask you only one question like this because you're probably tired of hearing it in one form or another.
No.
It's pretty obvious that you guys reflected your time and helped to shape it. But what do you think is the lasting meaning of the Beatles, if there's a meaning to be taken from this?
All you need is love. Should I elaborate?
If you'd like.
You know, after the 60s, that was kind of looked on as a bit sort of stupid. You know, hey, all you need is love, dude. You know, well, you need more. You know, we need weapons and we need defense or whatever, you know, which is also true. But it's coming back. It keeps rolling back, this idea that what these people on this planet need is love.
Hope you enjoyed this week of Laters with three great musicians, Bruce Springsteen, Paul Simon, and tonight, Paul McCartney. Next week, as our flashbacks continue, Billy Crystal, George Carlin, Dana Carvey, and Jay Leno. See you later.
New on Channel 2 News tonight. A nail-biter at the arena as the Sabres and Leafs fight tooth and nail for the series lead. We have team coverage. Good evening. We begin tonight with two plot twists on the Buffalo Sabres' road to the Cup. One, the Sabres beat Toronto to take the series lead tonight. But the series also turns ugly as the border war intensifies. My colleague Scott Levin is live at Marine Midland Arena tonight to begin our team coverage. Scott, the rivalry is definitely growing between the two teams.
It sure is, Victoria. Boy, it was electric inside the arena with over 18,000 fans in there tonight. The Sabres take a 2-1 lead in the Eastern Conference Finals. Let's check in with Sports Director right now, Ed Kilgore, who's inside the arena. Ed, boy, I got to tell you, having Dominic Hasek back made a big difference in the final score.
Scott, absolutely. Dominic Hasek and also the return of Miro Shatan, both these players who had been missing in the first two games were huge factors in the Sabres' 4-2 win. And, of course, as a result, they now have a 2-1 series lead, and they retain home ice advantage. But as Vic mentioned there, it did get a little bit ugly in the closing seconds. Chris King took a little shove at the Dominator, and the Dominator's teammates came to his rescue, so to speak, and it really did. Several penalties were handed out there in the closing seconds. They really were meaningless because the Sabres had gotten an empty net goal by Curtis Brown to close within or actually make the score 4-2. So the game really wasn't in doubt at that moment. Let's pick it up, though. In the second period, the Sabres had tied it at 1 when Miro Shatan scored. Then on a Leafs power play, and this is a huge play in the game, Michael Pekka, great move, saved by Cujo, but Joey Juneau puts it home. A shorthand goal gives the Sabres a 2-1 lead. Then still second period Sabre power play. And Stu Barnes, Johnny on the spot, he makes it 3-1. The Leafs do make it again, though. They make it 3-2 before, as we mentioned, the Sabres had that empty netter late in the game. But again, Miro Shatan's return tonight, almost as big a factor